Ding. There it is. So I am just so happy to see everyone here tonight. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Erin. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the relational organizing coordinator here at the Massachusetts Democratic Party. If you joined us last month for our first training, then you know how much of a positive and encouraging, just energizing space that we created together. So I really just can't wait to continue that energy tonight. Last month, I kicked us off by talking a little bit about how this program was born and why we felt such an immense call to continue organizing year-round. I, could talk about the power of relationship building and going deep rather than wide with outreach or, building up local leaders forever. But I don't want to repeat myself. So tonight, what I want to focus on is the power that each of you in this room have. So a lot of you are members of our Democratic State Committee, members or leaders in your local committees, or incredible activists and organizers in your communities. So we're building this team together. Let's put those relational organizing skills that we learned last month to practice. And what I'm going to do is drop a form in the chat, and it's a recommendation form. So if you know someone in your town, in your state Senate district, or anyone all the way across the Commonwealth that you think would be a great organizer in their community, let us know who they are. I'll give them a call. We'll talk about what type of organizing they're interested in and how we can support them here at Mass Dems. And you know what? Don't be afraid to nominate yourself. So this past month has been spent in just incredible conversation with local leaders, and I can't wait to keep that going. If you haven't already, please check out our full organizing program at massdems.org/blueprint, and I'll drop all of this in the chat as well. Like I said, let us know who you know, so fill out that form. I'll be sending it in an email after the training as well, but that's kind of our project to put our last training into practice. So I won't take any more of your time. I know that you all came here for a training tonight, and we are just so incredibly lucky to have Bhavana, the Deputy National Director at the DNC's Best Practices Institute, here with us tonight. Bhavana travels the country training Democratic staff, candidates, and volunteers on the many strategies and skills necessary to not only win campaigns up and down the ballot, but also build strong organizational infrastructure, which is exactly what we're all here to do tonight. So she's worked on grassroots campaigns in states across all regions of the country in field, finance, digital, and training. She really does it all, folks. We've got a really true expert here tonight. If you have any questions throughout, please throw them in the chat. I'll be keeping track, and we'll make sure that we touch on all of them at the end. And with that, Bhavana, thank you again, and I'll pass it over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Erin. And hi, everyone. It's wonderful to be here with you this evening. I get really energized by, getting to talk to folks all across the country, and to see so many people here on a Wednesday night, in the middle of summer is very, very exciting and encouraging, because it shows that so many people are so committed to the infrastructure work that has to be done to make sure that we continue to win races up and down the ballot and just be the strongest party we can be. So I'm very excited to see all of you today and to be doing this training. So tonight's training is going to be on the basics of field voter contact. We're going to talk a little bit about some strategy that goes into our field work, some methods of voter contact, different types of direct voter contact, a little bit about how our initiatives change throughout the time in the campaign or organizing cycle, and then a little bit about what we're doing right now. So I'm going to get started here. All right. So in every campaign, we have three resources: time, money, and people. And I like to say we have the best people, because that is what keeps us running. But these resources are limited, so we have to find the most effective ways to use them in order to achieve our ultimate goal, which is winning elections. So the timeline and phases of a campaign. Here are the phases of an electoral campaign. We've got base building, we've got ID and persuasion, and then we have GOTV. So the base building phase, which is the phase that we find ourselves in usually in that spring, early summer time period. And if we're looking at what we're doing now, the base building is always going to continue when we're in what many people would call an off year. Though I'm sure, as all of you are on the phone here today with us, understand that there is no off year, because we have to keep building that infrastructure. But in any case, the base building is the time when we're really building out that infrastructure and preparing ourselves for each next step. So we're targeting volunteers to recruit and train folks to make sure that they're geared up, that they know how to do this work. We're registering voters during this time, and we're building and cleaning out our lists of voters, of volunteers, making sure that we have the most up-to-date phone numbers, making sure that we have the best contact information for folks, putting us in a really good spot to go into the ID and persuasion phase. So the next phase, which is usually that summertime period before an election, where we're starting to do that direct voter contact. So this is where we're continuing to keep targeting volunteers and recruiting and training these people. We're building out our volunteer teams at this time. So this is great where we think about maybe if you're building out neighborhood teams, this is something that's being done. So you're empowering your volunteer leaders, just taking one more step and making them in charge of other folks and building out their networks even larger. And then we're doing the voter contact work. So we're identifying our supporters, we're doing direct voter contact, and we're using this time to persuade undecided voters. So these time frames, as I mentioned, I gave some rough guidelines. We've got kind of spring for base building, we've got summer for ID and persuasion, but this is going to depend a lot on the type of race you're running, on the type of year, and then on the type of campaign, of how long these periods last until you get up to GOTV. And GOTV, the most wonderful time of the year, is something I'm sure you're all very familiar with because we just got through with it last year, but where we're getting out the vote. And that's where we're targeting our voters, those high support voters, those lower turnout voters, all of the work we've been doing during the ID and persuasion time of identifying those folks. We're going back to them during GOTV and making sure that they actually go out and vote. So this is the work that we're doing during GOTV, and that usually starts when early voting begins, when people can actually start casting ballots. So that depends a lot on the state. Usually that's about September-ish timeframe, that fall timeframe. And you'll see, the work that we're doing change quite a bit during this time in terms of the people we're talking to and how we're talking to them. But for some campaigns and for some races, that persuasion time is not going to end, and they're going to go all the way up to the very end because they need to keep persuading folks to get out to vote and to vote for their candidate. So these times can be very flexible depending on the race. What's important is that every phase builds upon itself and is getting us to that ultimate point of building a lot of infrastructure and being able to have identified folks that we can count on to then make the calls to get folks out to actually cast their ballots. Let's talk about our pathway to victory a little bit. So let's talk about how we know who we're talking to and what gets us to that ultimate win on election night. And it starts out with determining who we're going to talk to. And that's what we call our voter universes. So we group voters into groups or universes based on two main characteristics. We determine this based on their likelihood to vote and their likelihood to support our campaign. And here are some key terms that are nice to know. And these terms may be things that you've heard before on CNN or MSNBC that seem really complicated, but are not at all complicated. Democratic Performance Index. And this is the one that people talk about hearing on CNN all the time, where the pundits are saying, oh, the DPI of the district, the DPI of the district. What does that mean? All it means is the Democratic Performance Index is the average of the votes garnered by competitive Democratic candidates during previous similar election cycles. So races that looked similar to the ones that were running, that were similar candidates, were similar types of elections. How did Democrats perform in those previous cycles? Much simpler than the way they like to make it sound. Other things that are important that go into building our voter universes are Democratic base vote. So these are our voters that have a very high likelihood of both turning out to vote and voting for a Democrat. These are also our volunteer recruitment targets because these are the folks that we know are really eager to vote for Democrats. And when they vote, they're going to vote for Democrats, and that we just know they're going to vote. This is all of you, right? This is our base vote, the people that make up, the party, the people that we can count on year after year after year. And we can count on them to vote, and we can also count on them to volunteer. We love our Democratic base voters. And the turnout targets. So these are voters that do not always turn out to vote, but they tend to vote Democratic when they do. We calculate these numbers by interpreting trends of past election cycles. Another way we can look at it is with this chart here, and we have always vote, swing voters, always vote Republican. We've got the folks that always vote all across the board in different buckets. We've got the folks that sometimes vote in different buckets, and we've got the folks that never vote in different buckets. And here we have our Dem base vote. All of you who are on this call today are volunteer recruitment targets, the ones that always vote and that always vote Democratic. We've got our sometimes vote. We've got our persuasion folks right here. We've got our never vote. And what this really does is that we have a GOTV universe of people that we are talking to get them to go to the polls in November. And our campaign work is going to lie here, but also in our persuasion universe, where we're trying to get people to pull them in to the GOTV targets, to our universes of, hey, you should vote for our candidates. Let's make sure that you get out, that you come out and vote for us. You should vote for our candidates and you should get out and vote. Let's make sure that you vote for us. We're trying to move people between these boxes so that we get them to vote on election day and we get them to vote for us. And this is not hard and fast because, again, as I mentioned, it's really going to depend a lot on the race. There are huge differences in who makes up our universe if we're in a reliably blue area versus an area like the one I grew up in, Kansas, where we are talking to some Republicans because we're trying to persuade them to vote for our candidates. And what's nice about some of these races is that you can't be afraid of talking to these Republicans when we know that they're people that vote. We know that they're people that we can talk to about our local issues. And all we have to do is persuade them to do one thing, which is come out for our candidates, the people that we know always vote. All we have to do is persuade them to do one thing. Easier to persuade some people to do one than to persuade some of these people to do two. They never vote. They're not sure who they're voting for. It's a little bit harder. So think about that with these universes as well, as that typically we're going to be trying to get people into our GOTV universe and talking to some of these swing voters, talking to these people that need just that extra push that are Dems to go out and vote. But if you're in a more competitive race, you might be talking to Republicans as well. And that's where your messaging is just really critical. All right. So a little bit about what makes up the folks that we talk to. But what's really important at the end of the day is our win number. And that is the number of votes a campaign needs in order to win the election. Key, right? Above all else, that's our goal. That's what we are doing all of our campaign work for at the end of the night, the win number. How do we calculate this? So the win number formula is the number of registered voters, and this is everybody. This is everybody in the whole district, including Republicans, who are all the people that are registered to vote, times the expected turnout. And this is going to be based on multiple factors. So what does previous turnout look like? What does the current electoral environment look like? Is there a really hot race on the ticket that's going to force lots of people to come out and vote? Is there a big initiative that's going to make people come out and vote? Is Donald Trump on the ballot and that's going to make people come out and vote? So expected turnout changes based on certain factors, but we look at the percentage there, times the margin of victory. And the margin of victory technically is 50% plus one vote, but we're not going to keep it, that close to the edge there. We say 51% or 52% to be safe. That way we know we're clearing that. We know that we're going to win. So number of registered voters times expected turnout times the margin of victory equals the win number. Vote gap. Another really important thing when we think about all the work that we're doing. So we know we want to get to that win number ultimately, but what do we have to do? What are other factors that we have to think about in getting there? And the vote gap is one of the biggest factors here. It's the number of votes between the number of votes you'll likely receive from your base universe, so from those Democrats that we can rely on, and your win number. So it's our gap between the votes we know we have and the votes that we need to get to the win number. So you can see this here. We've got our base votes, the folks that we know are most likely voting and most likely voting for us, got our win number that we need to achieve. We've just got to clear this gap in between here. And to clear the vote gap requires campaign work. So that's where all of you come in. We clear our vote gap through voter contact. So that's phone banking, texting, relational organizing, canvassing, anything we can do to increase that conversion rate, which is how much more likely people are to take an action following interactions with the campaign. So how much more likely they are to support your candidate, how much more likely they are to get out and vote, because you all talk to them. So that is how you clear that vote gap, by putting in that work and doing the voter contact. Here are some of our field tools and methods that we use in terms of voter contact. We have phone calls, we have text messages, we have canvassing or door knocking, and I'm sure that the majority of you on this call have done at least one, if not all, of those methods of voter contact. And then there are other ways that we contact voters as well, through voter contact materials. So those are commit to vote cards, those are advanced ballot applications or vote by mail applications, and voter registration applications. These are just all ways in which our campaigns might interface with voters. So these are just many of the methods of voter contact that we have, but there are many, many more. What does this mean? Ultimately, what this means is that campaigns put a lot of work into knowing which voters they want to talk to. So that way they know where to focus their resources and they know which messages to deliver to which voters. That's all based on that pathway to victory, but folks cannot do it without the work of all of you. So let's talk about this voter contact. Let's dig in a little bit here and learn some best practices, or just refresh some best practices for those of you that are old hats at all of this in terms of our direct voter contact. All right, so the best times to contact voters. What are the best times to contact voters? On weekdays, and I'm going to call weekdays Monday through Thursday here. The best time to contact voters is that 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. time frame, times when the majority of people are off of work and they're at home and we know that we can reach them. On weekends, these hours change a little bit. On Saturdays, we're talking to folks between 10 a.m. and 5 p.m. And that makes a lot of sense when you think about it, right? We don't want to get anyone too early on a Saturday, but we also don't want to go too late, because chances are that people might not be home. They're over at their sister's house for a barbecue or whatever it might be. And so we don't want to put in too much time if we're not going to get people. And then on Sundays, we're talking to folks from 1 p.m. to 8 p.m. And that's, we're giving them their Sunday mornings, if there are any religious observances that they have, but we're taking them all the way into the evening, because think about it. On Sundays, you've got laundry that's piled up and you're sitting at home and you're doing it, and you're cooking for the week and you're doing all the things that you don't want to do. That's when we're going to talk to voters. That's when we know they're home. And that's when, if you knock on my door, I'm going to be really excited to talk to someone and not have to do my load of laundry. So that's when we talk to voters on Sundays. However, these hours are extended during GOTV, which means that we're talking to folks on Friday nights, because if we're going to get someone on a Friday night and we're going to tell them to turn in their ballot, we're going to try to do that because it's so close to the end. These hours are also extended during this moment in history, when we have folks who are working from home, when we have folks that are staying at home during the day at times that they may not have before. And we're able to reach people who we may have difficulty reaching in other ways. Phones are a great way of reaching younger voters that aren't usually at home, but now they are because of remote work. And I will say there were definitely points during this pandemic where I don't care who called me, I was just so excited to talk to another person. So we do extend these times during this time right now and during GOTV, because it's so critical that we get our message out. But again, these are the times that we are really maximizing the work that we're putting in and making sure that if there's a football game or people are going out on Friday nights, that we're not talking to folks when they're not home. All right, so some best practices when it comes to phone banking. Phone banking is a really critical part of voter contact, and that means that we have to dedicate specific time to make those calls. We can't just hope that it happens or plan for it to happen someday. We have to make sure that we actually create a shift and set aside specific times to intentionally make our phone calls. Do be friendly and persistent when you're on the phone. People respond to positive energy, they respond to excitement, but people are also wary in terms of talking to strangers. So you may have to be a little bit persistent to have that authentic conversation with a voter. Make it personal. And I say this to everybody, whether it's your first time phone banking or your 10,000th time, phone banking. Sit down and think about why you support Democrats, why you are specifically doing your volunteer shift today, why this is important to you, this election, this candidate, whatever it might be, before you start dialing. Because I think more often than not, that's where that connection comes in. When, especially if we think about it right now, when community members are calling community members, it's the things that are impacting you in your community that are impacting you to make this phone call that will ultimately make some sort of change. Sit with that, think about that, because I think it's really inspiring before you start talking to people. And it is a great way when someone asks you, "Oh, I mean, why are you even calling me right now?" That you have a response and you can talk about why this election is important to you, or why this particular issue that's impacting your community is important to you, and build that connection, which causes people to open up. That personal connection is really, really what does it. So think about this before you start making your calls, because it can open up a whole world of possibilities in terms of building out that connection and having a really positive conversation. And I think it motivates you as well. Always set a call goal for yourself, or if you are in charge of other volunteers, set a call goal for the group before you start. This is a really good way of holding people accountable to the actual numbers goals, but also seeing how their progress impacts the greater work that we're doing. This isn't just about one night that we're calling. It's that one night with these 5 volunteers, and each of these volunteers making 100 calls. We made 500 calls, and 500 calls over the course of 10 weeks puts us at this many calls, which puts us at this many attempts that getting us to election day. Those numbers really, really add up. And it's important to talk to people about that and give them the context behind why, because the work that they do is so critical, and it keeps them going through those difficult calls. It keeps them going through the hangups or the disconnected numbers of knowing, okay, I just have to hit this amount for today, but I know that my impact is just that much bigger to not just the whole group around me today, but to what we're trying to achieve this month, and then this season, and then this year, and it's going to get really great people elected and make sure our voices are heard. So give people that context, give them a goal, it'll keep them going. And biggest one, smile as you dial. It is so, so real that people can tell if you are not smiling on the other side of the phone. I can just give an example of this. If I am, just saying, hello, this is Bhavana with the Democrats, with just a straight face. So like, hi, this is Bhavana with the Democrats. I'm calling to see if your voter registration is up to date. People can tell I'm bored. People do not want to talk to me. People are not going to respond to it, versus me smiling, even if I don't feel like it. Hi, this is Bhavana with the Democrats. I'm here to talk to you about if your voter registration is up to date. It makes a distinct difference in your tone. And ultimately, even that smile will make you a little bit happier in your head as well and help you get through all of those calls. So smile as you dial. It will lead to much more positive engagement with folks. Some don'ts about phone banking, because we've got to talk about the don'ts too. Don't brush people off. Don't pretend to be a policy expert on every issue. If you don't know the answer, just say so. Be relatable and honest. This one is so big. I think people get really nervous on, oh my gosh, I don't know the candidate's policy plan when it comes to water reform. What am I going to do? You're a human. Nobody knows that except for the candidate and the policy experts. That's okay. Be honest with folks. You don't have to say things that you don't know about. In fact, it's a really great opportunity to say, hey, you know what? I don't know the answer to that question. But if you provide me with an email address or the best number to reach you, I'm going to get back to you. And then get that answer for them, get back to them, and surprise them with your follow-up and see, oh, wow, that person really cared about getting me the information, and you get an email address out of it. So that's an option for those moments where you're stuck and you're not sure what the policy issues are. Use that to your advantage and actually have some follow-up and build out a relationship there. Don't let your conversations go too long on the phone. There's so many voters we need to reach in a short amount of time. We've got the people that are really passionate, that want to talk at length about the issues that are impacting them. That's wonderful, but we found out that they supported Democrats. We found out that they're planning on voting on election day. They've made their plan. Great, we've got to keep going. And we've got all of those people. We also, on the converse, have people that just want to fight. that just want to argue with you, that are just really looking to get into it on the phone, that's not worth your time either. Don't engage in arguments. It will only make you unhappy and take time from those other voters you need to talk to. Let's talk a little bit about door knocking best practices now that we're able to, in some areas, start getting back onto doors. So with door knocking, once again, be friendly and persistent, because it does take maybe a little bit of initiative to get that conversation going. Do follow your script. It is there for a reason. The language is tested. The language has been proven. Make sure that you're following that script for the best outcomes on the door. Do collect accurate data. If you've got a question about how to code that data, make notes and talk to a campaign organizer first. Only mark responses for people you actually speak to on your list. And I say this as someone who did some campaign work in Kansas. I would knock on a door and the person would open it and say, "We don't vote for Democrats here," and slam the door in my face, while in the window I saw the spouse waving and giving me a thumbs up. So there's a big difference between the person that might answer the door and the actual person you were there to talk to. So only mark responses for people that are actually the ones you're supposed to talk to on your list. Do remember that canvassing is a legal right. People have the right to hear from their elected officials and from their candidates for office. So you have a right to be there. Knock on the doorbell and ring the door. Knock on the door and ring the doorbell. This is important because sometimes people's doorbells are broken and they might hear that knock, or they just need an additional minute or two to get to the door. So if you do both, you're giving people that time to get to you, and you might miss out on a good conversation if you forget to do one or the other. So best practice is to do both. And have your organizer's cell phone number. If something comes up, if you're unsure about something that is happening, if you're not going to make it back to the office, have that organizer's cell phone number so that you can reach out and tell them, so that they're not worried and not looking for you. Some don'ts when it comes to door knocking. Don't go inside a house or stay at one door too long. Safety first, always. But the other thing is that there's so many other doors that you have to knock, and sometimes you may have the best conversation and get to drink milk and cookies, but unfortunately you missed out on 10 other doors. So don't go inside houses. We can't guarantee that it's safe, and also it just takes time from those other doors. Don't give people an out. So steer clear of using language like, "Do you have a minute to talk?" or "Are you busy?" Because the person's going to say, "Yeah, I'm too busy to talk to this random person on my stoop." That's why we use the script, because those give people an out, and that's not something that we're looking for here. Don't put literature in a mailbox. Never, 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 ever do this. It's a federal offense. Leave lit on the door or the doormat. And this is just a best practice that I like to say is you want to make sure that you're having connection with people. So sometimes sunglasses can prevent that. We need to be connecting with our voters. And if you've got sunglasses right on the door, they're like, "Who is this stranger whose face I can't see?" So I like to wear a baseball cap so that I am still shielding my face and keeping out the sun, or just take those sunglasses and put them on your head. So that way we're able to have that person-to-person connection, which is what gets us voters. All right, I would demonstrate this here, but just remember to knock with purpose. I can't since I'm sitting in this chair, but give 3 big knocks, step back because you don't want to be right up in a person's face when they open up that door. Wait about 15 seconds, knock again, wait about 15 seconds. There's no answer, leave your literature and move on to the next house. But remember, don't leave that literature in the mailbox. All right, and we talked about SMS outreach as another form of direct voter contact. Let's talk about it in a little bit more depth now. So SMS outreach or texting is a really good option to reach voters because it has an 82% open rate and a 25% reply rate. Then you think about it, it makes sense. If you think about your email inbox, I have 3,000 unread emails from just promotional things and random stuff I signed up for and who even knows what. I have a lot of emails I haven't read, but if I look at my texting inbox, I have no unread text messages. Even if I don't always respond, I've read it and it's gone into my head, which is why texting can be a really powerful tool to remind people of voting or events or all sorts of things, because we know that they most likely have seen it and opened it, and that information is going in their head, and there's a good shot of them responding. So we can use texting for a variety of reasons. We can use texting to remind people to vote. We can use texting to ask someone to attend an event. We can use texting to ask someone to volunteer. It's a really great option for voter contact, but always talk to your state party before texting voters because they will have the most up-to-date information on the rules around texting voters, the best tools, the best lists of folks to talk to. So think about that if you're planning out a texting program. Some scripting information for you when you are texting voters. Be authentic. SMS is a pretty informal way of talking to folks, so let your voice and personality shine. If you're someone or if you're a campaign that likes to use emojis, then by all means do so if that's what's authentic to you. You do need to make sure that you avoid links in the first message when you're texting though, because these messages may be marked as spam if you're sending them. And we just need to make sure that we are in fact reaching the person we want to talk to and that they're a Democrat before we give them, say, the Zoom link for our next meeting with a candidate. So just avoid a link in a first message for safety's sake and so that you're not marked as spam. Your text message should be under 200 characters. You want to gauge interest before sending too much information. And those response texts are a great place to convey additional information. Other best practices here is that you want that back and forth to start happening. You want voters to feel comfortable talking to you in this method of SMS. So end with a question. An action item keeps people engaged, keeps people responding. And make sure with that you are always replying. Even if the answer is no, you're trying to build a relationship so that the individual might say yes next time. And it's showing that you're a real human on the other side. You're not a bot. You're there to have a real conversation with them. And you're there to build a relationship of, oh, the Democrats text me and I like it. Some best practices if you are going to be texting voters, set aside specific time to text voters, just like you would with any other form of voter contact. And it's tempting not to set aside time to do this because you're like, oh, I can text people whenever. I can do it right now. I can do it tomorrow when I'm in line at the grocery store, or whatever it is. But that's when we forget to do it. So schedule volunteers into 2-hour shifts the same way you would if you were doing a phone shift or a door shift, and set goals the same way you would if you're doing a phone shift or a door shift. This way you can track volunteer progress and keep folks motivated. Make sure that you're recording your data just like any other form of voter contact. This is real voter contact too. So we need to know who you talked to, when you talked to them, what happened, what was the outcome. This is really critical to making sure that we're doing the best sorts of outreach. We know who we can reach in which ways. Very, very important. Record that data. Do have a texting script ready ahead of time. So always have scripted messages ready to go when the voter returns your message, whether it's a yes to voting, a no to voting, or whatever your ask is. You have canned messages ready to go that you can send to folks. And make sure that your volunteers continue to reply to messages as they receive them, even after their shift is finished, because we know that people text back sometimes hours later or a day later, and we don't want them to feel like we didn't want to connect with them just because our shift ended. So make sure that folks know that if they're texting, they may have to respond at a later time, and that is really important into making sure that those text relationships are positive ones. All right, so I talked a little bit about make sure that you record your data. The importance of data cannot be understated. Our data lives in Vote Builder or VAN, and I'm sure this is something that will be talked about at a later training, so I'm not going to go too deeply into this, but I do want to give a couple data entry best practices because they're really important to think about before you embark on direct voter contact, because they're going to make your work that much more meaningful. If it's not in Vote Builder, it didn't happen, and will help inform your other campaign decisions, who you're talking to, how you're contacting them, all that good stuff. So some do's for data entry. Do mark the appropriate results according to the response keys. Do return those physical walk sheets or call sheets to your organizer so that they can make sure that they get entered in. Do, if you're the one who's giving out those walk sheets or call sheets, mark who took which one and if and when they were returned. So if not, you can give them a call and say, hey, Joe, where are your walk sheets? And you can say, oh my goodness, I left them in the back of my car, but I'll be back tomorrow. That way you can make sure that you get that data entered so we don't lose those good conversations that happen with people. Do enter those call or walk sheets as soon as possible so that that data is fresh and can help inform those next decisions. Do ask questions about entering data if you're unsure about what to do. And when canvassing, make sure that you use minivan if possible and commit that minivan data, especially if you're an administrator, so that it actually does go into Vote Builder. So those are some do's. Some don'ts with data entry. Don't write out super long notes that duplicate the information meant to be collected by the response keys, or super long notes that only you understand and isn't going to be translatable when we try to put that data back into van. So, oh my goodness, they were so friendly. They had a dog with a purple collar, yada, 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 yada. Okay, but are they going to vote for a candidate? Make sure that we get that information. Don't lose your walk or call sheets or take them home with you after a shift, because that data does need to get entered as soon as possible. Don't confuse deceased with disconnected and accidentally kill off your entire call sheet list. That's not good. Make sure that you ask questions if you're not sure what those codes are. They're so small and slightly confusing, so always clarify. Don't mark busy if the voter said they were busy. Only mark busy if the phone line was actually busy. It means completely different things into if we're going to call them again. And don't forget to sync or commit your minivan data if applicable, because we've got to make sure that it goes back into van and can actually be used at a later time. All right, GOTV. I'm going to talk a little bit about GOTV, Get Out the Vote, the most wonderful time of the year, which seems like a very, very far ways off for many of us, but is going to be just around the corner. And again, all of the work that we're doing now is leading us to the point in which we are going to be turning out those voters to vote on election day. So Get Out the Vote is always something to think about, and because it's the end goal, it's where we're building up to be. So what is GOTV? Get Out the Vote, the phase of the campaign where we focus on voter turnout. And again, this depends on the race. There may be races where you're still going to be persuading voters, but for the majority of folks, we're focused on turnout. Time period from when voter registration closes to election day. However, every state's different when they start their early voting in person, by mail, etc. So this time frame can be really flexible, but generally, again, GOTV starts when voting starts. And during GOTV, our focus is shifting from identifying new supporters to reaching out to our GOTV targets and known supporters and encouraging those voters to vote early in person, to vote by mail, or at their polling location on election day. So what do you expect during GOTV? Lots of things change. We see changes to the script. We're starting to use specific proven language to turn out voters. We're using social pressure language to encourage voters to vote early, to turn in their ballot, or to vote on election day, giving them that extra nudge. We're asking them to make a plan to vote. What time are you going to vote? Where are you going to vote? How are you going to get there? Don't be afraid to ask these questions. Again, proven language here. It's helping them actually walk through the thought process. And we'll talk about that in just a second. In most cases, we're not doing persuasion, but this is super dependent on the race. There's new literature. So the literature where you see the candidate and you see the dog and you see the sunshine in the background, the really glossy, fun promotional lit from the beginning of the campaign is not there anymore. We're focusing on election day or early vote focus, giving folks the information that they need to go vote. There's oftentimes a new office flow when we're in person with a focus on getting people out the door or on phones and not just hanging out. And you'll notice that we have multiple conversations with a single voter. And in many cases, we're trying to talk to everyone in our GOTV universe at least 2 or 3 times, sometimes more, so that they actually go and take that step and cast a ballot. So let's look at a script and we'll talk about where that social pressure language and some of that make a plan language comes into play here and why it's so important. And this talks a little bit about why it's important to follow a script. So we start out by digging into identity and community. Hi, is so-and-so available? My name is Bhavana with the Democrats, and I'm talking with voters in our neighborhood about the upcoming election, and everyone seems really excited to vote. So here's some social pressure. I'm talking with voters in our neighborhood, and everyone seems really exciting to vote. And I'm showing that I'm part of the community, voters in our neighborhood. Then I move on. Public records show you're a reliable voter, but I want to make sure you have everything you need so you can vote no matter what. Can we count on your support for Democrats like? And then I go through my list of candidates. We've got more social pressure here. Public records show you're a reliable voter. I'm just reminding them that they vote is public information. Who they vote for is, of course, private, but your neighbors are going to know if you don't vote, so you better vote. So social pressure is holding people accountable to their voting records in the past, present, and the future. We then go to making a plan. When you vote, do you plan to vote early or on election day? And then I go in and I start asking those creepy questions, but the questions that are actually really, really important. So if they're voting early, okay, here's your early voting location. What day are you going to be going to vote early? What time? How are you getting there? And the reason being that when I ask these questions, I guess I'm going to go tomorrow. Great. What time? Before work. Great. How are you getting there? I'm driving. No, I'm not driving. Oh my gosh, my daughter's taking the car tomorrow. I can't go before work. I'm going to have to figure out another time. So we're helping them go through just the very real logistical challenges of figuring how to get from point A to point B and get that ballot cast. That's why making a plan is so, so important. You're helping them fix all of the hurdles that they might have to vote and getting them there. And then the follow-up. Thanks for being a good citizen who votes. We'll follow up with you after the election to see how your voting experience was. Have a great day. Again, some social pressure. We're going to follow up with you after the election, so you better have voted. Key takeaways here. We talked a lot about GOTV. We talked a lot about the different phases of a campaign and why we do the things that we do when we do them. But the key takeaways are that the win number and the pathway to victory guide our campaign strategy. And we use proven tactics to reach out to voters, that direct voter contact. And clearing our vote gap requires a huge amount of work, and it's only possible with work from volunteers like you. Collecting and entering data helps us ensure that we're implementing our strategy effectively. We're able to course correct, we're able to troubleshoot, we're able to actually make real-time decisions when that data comes back in, which is why it's so important. And we're working all year to gear up for GOTV. What we're doing right now is inadvertently gearing us up for GOTV, building strong volunteer leaders who are able to take that charge. So we're identifying and persuading voters, we're ensuring strong contact data, and we're increasing our volunteer capacity, which is what ultimately gets us across the finish line here. All right, that is the presentation. It's a little bit in terms of voter contact. I know we've just scratched the surface in many ways, or we covered a lot of information depending on where you are, but that's okay because this is the beginning of a very long series that's going to be so comprehensive. We're just so excited that all of you are here. If you do have more questions or more, you're just so excited about this and you want to dig more into training, you can learn more about the Best Practices Institute at democrats.org. You can also sign up for our monthly BPI newsletter to stay updated on all training opportunities. We have a variety of public-facing training programs, and we'd love to have folks come and join us. And we have a BPI Victory Vault, which is our on-demand training portal. It lives on our through the Democrats website, and it has about 100+ training resources on all aspects of campaigns. So it's really useful if you're looking just to brush up or to learn a whole set of new skills. A great place to look. You can email us at bpi@dnc.org. Check us out on social media by searching #BPI training, or text training to 43367 to sign up for BPI updates. And I'm going to drop the information on the BPI newsletter and the Victory Vault into the chat so that you have it. But with that, let's open the floor for questions.
Awesome, Bhavana. Thank you so much again for joining us. I'll kind of go through some of the questions we have in the chat, and then if we have time, people can keep throwing them in the chat, or I can unmute some folks and you can talk too. But the first thing, so Christopher Jenkins mentioned careful being too closely tied to the script and the concern for it being scripted. And so I'm wondering, how do you walk the line between following a script and sounding scripted?
That's a really good question. So some of the ways that I troubleshoot this is, I think the number one answer is really effective training, because oftentimes we say stick to the script, stick to the script, stick to the script, because people will forget what they're supposed to be asking about or veer off completely. And you're right, there is definitely a line. We do not want to sound like robots on the phone. But ways that I think this is important is have people practice the script ahead of time with a partner so that they're actually having a real conversation with another person and are able to also not just be reading it, they know to look up, they know to have a real conversation, they know not to be robotic. But other things that I like to do with people who are scared when using the script, and those are the folks that we do hear being robotic on the phone, is that I like to mark up their script for them. Because a lot of times with the ask at the end, can I count on you to vote on election day? A lot of people ask this as a question, which makes a lot of sense because there's a question mark at the end of that sentence. And I get rid of that and I put in a period, or I will write in dashes so that they pause at certain points. Or I put in a point that says like, put in your own intro and write it out for yourself. So try to customize that script and helping to make sure that even if you're reading directly from it, you're changing your inflection, you're changing where you're pausing, you're actually being intentional and sounding like a real human. And if you're the type of person that's going to that you want to be able to customize it a little bit, to write out some of those things ahead of time. Of course, people who have done this for years and years and years are great at this and can, make sure that they're putting their own spin on it and using their own greetings and all that good stuff while still getting the information that they need with the script. So I think it's a balance between training people and getting people comfortable with it so that they can get to that point of being able to put their own spin on it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's actually a lot of the people on this call today have probably gotten a call from an intern at the Mass Dems confirming them for this training. And it's something that we teach them too, which is create your own script, take the information, take the necessary bits and sound like yourself. So that's perfect. Another question. So Nick Herder asked, when phone banking, how do you extract yourself from a conversation that's going on too long and might not be very productive? He shared an anecdotal story about his first ever phone banking call was over a 30-minute call with someone who wanted the state Senate candidate to amend the US Constitution and reform Medicare. So how do you kindly remove yourself from a conversation of that sort?
That's when you got to be creative and gently let these people down. So sometimes that can just be, oh my goodness, thank you so much. I realize that I'm getting another call and I'm going to have to take that, but it's been a great conversation. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Boom. You just got to try to get that free space and not let them talk over you and just say, great, thank you so much. I'm actually going to hop off the phone. Goodbye. Pretend you have another call coming through or whatever it might be, and just be really, really firm in that. If you've got your outer, my supervisor's coming this way, or someone else in the office is coming this way, I'm going to talk to them. Thanks so much for this great conversation. Goodbye. And it may seem harsh, but you know that these are folks that are going to talk for 30 minutes. And sometimes it's great to hear those conversations and it can be really empowering, but all the other voters we have to talk to. And sometimes I say that too, because sometimes I have conversations with really strong Democrats who just want to talk. And I say, I'm having such a good time talking to you, but I've got about 100 more people on my list that I've got to go. So I'm going to let you go, but have a wonderful rest of your evening. So it kind of depends which side of that spectrum they're falling on if it's a great conversation and you can give them that, or I'm getting another call, goodbye type conversation.
Yeah, I think that's definitely something that when I'm in those great calls with those great Dems, I'm always like, oh, you know what, Erin, move on to the next. You've got to move on, because anyone on here that knows me knows I can talk forever. So there's been some debate in the chat box about what is the most and least impactful engagement activities. Is it canvassing, phones, texting, dear friend cards, relational, and then kind of piggybacking on that, Linda Broadfield, and sorry, that was Mark Riley that asked that. And then Linda Broadfield asked, people don't tend to answer the phone sometimes. So how effective is our time doing that?
So what direct voter contact really boils down to is the person-to-person conversation that you're having, because that's what moves people to action, is that it's a real person from their community having a conversation with them about why it's important to vote or why this candidate is doing the initiative that they're doing. So where we see the greatest conversion rate comes from the most personal conversation, which is oftentimes canvassing, because we're having that face-to-face impact. We're able to really have a real story, and we're attaching a face to the issue of, I'm here in the cold rain knocking on your door because this election is so important to me and to our community, and that's why I'm here. And that tends to move people to action, and which is why when it's GOTV time, you have a field organizer begging you to get on doors when you want to make calls, because it is something that really, really increases that conversion rate of that interaction with the campaign goes so much further. And of course, we do have things that are becoming like some people can ignore a text or people can ignore a phone call, but we still know that those methods, when the connection happens, are really impactful, which is why we still do them. And it's a numbers game in many ways, which is why, as you might not be getting as many calls, the calls that you are having are percentage wise moving people to action in a way that's really impactful. And again, the more personalized that is, the greater that it is in terms of getting people to go take the action. So when they see your face, the greater it is. When they hear your voice, the greater it is, which is why we can't overly rely on things like texting or postcards. While they do have really big impacts, are not going to be the same thing as that conversation that you are able to have that moves someone to action.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And I think the beauty of having all of these approaches also allows, folks at different comfort levels to get involved in all different ways. So they definitely exist for a reason. But I think a lot of us on the call can recognize that we're all excited to get back on the doors and talking face to face with folks. So kind of in the same vein, Linda Broadfield asked, is it good to leave messages on answering machines? And I know this can kind of differ based on the type of calls or the time on the campaign. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
No, you hit it on the head, Erin. It's going to depend a lot on what time of the year it is, which one of the phases of the campaign that we're in. If you are going to try to have a conversation with this person again, so you're going to call them again, then we're not going to leave a message, because we want to actually have that real conversation. We want to be able to share our story. We want them to have that connection with us. However, if it's the last week of the election, we just need to make sure that they cast their ballot, or if we're giving them information on, maybe we're doing a set of calls the week before to a list of people we know have requested absentee ballots but haven't turned them in yet, then maybe it's time to leave that message, because we only have a short window left and we need to make sure that they get the right information. And that's when we're leaving the message. So usually you see this towards the last phase of the campaign, or maybe it's the last 3 days before the absentee ballot deadline for folks. And we're saying, hey, here are your locations to drop it off. You need to do it by this time and have this type of postage, or it doesn't count. So it's things like that of the last ditch effort is when that message is left.
Awesome. We're nearing the end, so we'll wrap up on questions soon. But Christopher Jenkins also asked expected turnout, and I think this is a clarifying question. Expected turnout is a percentage rather than a raw number, right? And maybe you want to talk a little bit more about how we come up with those numbers and where that comes from.
Yes, that is correct. Expected turnout is a percentage. Our numbers would be quite high beyond the number of people that are actually registered to vote or live in the place if it was an actual number. So it's percentage when we look at expected turnout. So we've got total registered voters times expected turnout, which is a percentage, times that 51 or 52% margin of victory gives us our win number.
Beautiful. So unless anyone wants to try and snag one last question in the chat, I might do what is rarely done and let us wrap up perfectly on time. I just really want to take a second and thank you all for joining us tonight. It always, it means the world to me to see folks come and embracing these inclusive and meaningful and creative ways that we can all organize together. And of course, Bhavana, a huge, huge thank you to you tonight. I wouldn't be a good organizer if I didn't take advantage of this moment to make an ask of all of you. So like I mentioned at the start of the hour, this program is much more than these just incredible and informational training sessions. We're taking action too. We need all of your involvement to make these statewide impacts, and I will bump that nomination form for you all, and I'll include it in a follow-up email too. So please, let us know who you know. Share and visit our website, and I'm dropping this in the chat so people can snag it before you run. And I'll let you all enjoy your Wednesday evening. So thank you all so much, and we can give a silent round of applause for Bhavana this evening as well. So thank you, Bhavana.
Thanks all. Thanks so much for having me and for all of the wonderful work you're doing in your communities. We could not do this without you. So thank you.
Thanks, everyone.